In 1917 in Russia, one of the most important events in world history would take place. That fall, a quick succession of events would occur that would reshape world politics for the next 75 years. The actions and thoughts behind these actions were truly revolutionary. By the turn of the 20th century, Russia was ripe for revolution. Tsarist policies had left peasants exploited and restless, the middle class growing frustrated from political immobility, and the elite fearing for their security. With the end of serfdom only a few decades prior, both the rural former serf population and elite landowners were struggling to find their place in Russian society. With rapid population growth in the peasant class, the specter of famine loomed over Russia. With the onset of the Industrial Revolution in Europe, Russians saw some of the evils this would bring. Awful working conditions and cramped living spaces that accompany rapidly growing city centers. Industrialization would bring another element that would be crucial to Russia's revolution: solidarity between workers. Past traditions and beliefs of the autocratic Tsar being a benevolent father figure for the population were becoming antiquated and harder to believe in the face of such struggles. Tsar Nicholas II's reign was in dire straits when in 1914, Russia entered World War I. After several military defeats, Nicholas II would assume role as commander-in-chief of Russia's armed forces. Every military failure after this point would be viewed by many Russians as Nicholas's fault. This would signal the death knell for Tsar Nicholas's reign. By 1917, Russians viewed the Tsar and the royal family as the biggest obstacle to victory for Russia. In late February and early March, worker protests and military mutiny would force Nicholas II to abdicate his throne. Provisional parliamentary government would quickly be set up, but would not last. In 1917, a group with a radical ideology would gain unmatched power. This group was known as the Bolsheviks. With the support of German money, due to Germans hoping for class conflict instead of continued participation in World War I for the Russians, the Bolsheviks would grow more than tenfold between March and November of 1917. With large numbers of workers and city centers supporting the socialist ideas being promoted by the Bolsheviks, the revolutionary Vladimir Ilyich Lenin provided the ideology for this new group. Lenin, who had recently returned from exile in Germany after being banished from Russia due to openly protesting Tsarist rule, would be the movement's mouthpiece. Embracing and adopting Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto and the ideas behind it, Lenin would help set up the first socialist government in modern history. He preached a doctrine of equality, peace after the initial overthrow of capitalism and government, and democracy for all Russians.
Under socialism, much of primitive democracy will inevitably revive, since, for the first time in history of civilized societies, the mass of the population will be raised to independent participation, not only in voting and elections, but in day-to-day administration. Under socialism, all will administer, in turn, and will quickly become accustomed to nobody administering.
He argued for a slowly dissolving state that would help transition the nation from capitalism to total scientific socialism.
So long as the state exists, there is no freedom. When freedom exists, there will be no state.
Lenin's promises of land, peace, and bread appealed to many throughout the country, but especially to the peasant population who'd been hungry and without land of their own for so long. Soon support spread far and wide for the Bolshevik Party. Less popular with the upper class was the cry of "loot the loot," which encouraged the lower class to sack and pillage the upper class of their belongings. There would be no place for such flaunting of wealth in a classless society, as was promised by the Bolsheviks. With administrative and timing help from another party leader, Petrograd's Soviet chairman Leon Trotsky, the Bolsheviks would lead a mostly bloodless seizure of power from the rest of the provisional government. Trotsky's speaking ability to motivate troops, and thorough planning would all combine to help the Bolsheviks successfully conduct a coup d'etat in early November of 1917. These events go by many names. They are sometimes referred to as the Bolshevik Revolution, the October Revolution, or Red October. Not long after these events, on December 15th, Bolshevik leaders would sign an armistice with Germany and Austria-Hungary, removing Russia from World War I. Despite a large amount of popular support, anti-communist forces that argued the legitimacy of the government emerged to challenge the Bolsheviks. They would become known as the White Army, and they would quickly become the main adversary of the Bolsheviks. Warring between the White Army and the Bolsheviks' military branch, the Red Army, would go on for years. This conflict would become known as the Russian Civil War. After taking control of Tsarist arms stockpile, the Red Army would quickly become the strongest military of the region, with munitions far superior to that of the White Army. This would help them overcome white forces for good in 1921. This would result in the cementing of policies and a new nation, which would be known as the United Soviet Socialist Republics, or the Soviet Union. This state, however, would not be the state originally promised or envisioned by Lenin before the 1917 revolution. Instead, what emerged would be a permanent dictatorship, a huge government, state control of the economy, and even some aspects of capitalism introduced in Lenin's new economic plan in 1921. Additionally, the Soviet army would be the largest and most active army in the world, despite Lenin's original promises of peace. These policies would often be explained away as temporary and transitional, but the USSR would never become the stateless, proletariat-run utopia as was promised.